Okay, it's time for episode 9. No surprises here. Me, Chucky from the forums as always, and Jigsaw as well.
Hope you are doing okay.
Yep, I'm sure they are. So, we've got a whole new lineup of movies to discuss. What's on the board for today?
Indeed, it's a pretty interesting lineup too. First up, we have 1990 Maniac Cop 2, which is a sequel to a movie we previously spoke about. Following that, we have an Australian movie from 2015 titled Cat Sick Blues. Then we have a somewhat of a classic, lower-end classic, Sorority House Massacre from 1986. Then we have a somewhat well-liked movie, Laid to Rest from 2009. And we'll finish off with a non-horror movie of tonight, being Donnie Darko from 2001.
We'll get things started. So Matt Cordell, the undead cop, is back for Maniac Cop 2, and he's still seeking justice against those that murdered him in prison, which in turn reveals some dirty politician activity along the way. I'd like to, talk more about the plot, but to be honest, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. So Maniac Cop 2, I think it's a sequel that is as good as the original. May not be as suspenseful because we kind of know about the character now, as we didn't so much in the original, but whatever they lack in that area, they provide more action. I think it's a little more refined. Cordell, we see a lot more of him this time, and he's got some interesting makeup. I think he's quite a underrated slasher figure in the horror genre. Even to this day, I think he's still a little underrated and doesn't get talked about as much as he should.
I just want to say sort of one quick thing about this one. I thought it was almost as good as the original movie, the first movie, with the exception of, I forget what the character's name is off the top of my head, but there's an actor here, Leo Rousey, who plays just a very talkative serial killer. Seems almost, to me, he's almost used purely for comedic effect. And that guy pretty much got on my nerves as soon as he first appeared. And just trying to talk to Cordell, just keeps talking, and Cordell's just sitting there. I just did not care for those scenes. So had they maybe changed the dynamics a little, or done something differently, I might have enjoyed that more.
I think just to cut in, I'm thinking the reason is because they wanted someone really talkative, obviously because Cordell doesn't speak, and
well, apparently he does.
Oh well, he kind of like utters his name in the movie, but aside from that, and he really struggled to let that out. But aside from that, he is actually featured a lot in scenes in this movie, and I guess to avoid a lot of silence, they needed someone who would, be talking.
I admit I probably would have been okay with the silence, but that is, otherwise, I pretty much agree with Chucky. I think this is a really enjoyable movie. There's somewhat surprising scenes throughout. There's a lot of exciting scenes. So, generally speaking, I think it's enjoyable. Just that one thing just annoyed the hell out of me. But so, what, Chucky, about this movie speaks to you?
I just think how much cooler it is. It's just got some really cool action scenes. Like, for instance, there's a scene where he stops a chainsaw with his hand, and he just and you kind of expect more of a fight, but as soon as he does that, and then he just kind of snaps her neck straight away, unexpectedly, really fast.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a pretty surprising death, in my opinion.
Mainly because that death scene involves a prominent character from the first movie, and who we thought would at least make it through to the end of this entire movie. So
I didn't even think the first one, from the first movie, was going to die as that character did. So, that newspaper, near the newspaper stand, that scene took me completely by surprise.
Yeah, they're not overly gory kills. They're sort of violent, but yeah, pretty decent kills in the movie. So we've got Bruce Campbell. He was obviously I think the idea was that he didn't want to do or continue the movie, but he was in it just to kind of, bring some closure, I guess, to his character.
Which is just probably a very good idea, because some sequels feel somewhat disconnected from the first movies, but this one feels like a direct continuation, and I thought they did a pretty good job with that.
Yeah, and they essentially replace his character with a new one played by Robert Davi, who is one of my more favorite actors. I can pretty much watch him in anything that he's in, because he usually plays really good villains. He was one of the best James Bond villains, to my memory. Even though not everyone loves License to Kill, I think it's the best James Bond movie out there. I'm not a huge James Bond movie fan.
Moon Reggae for the win. So.
Anywho, but yeah, I mean, his involvement is also a big plus for me, because I like him in a lot of different movies that he's in.
Yeah, I also wanted to point out, there was one character toward the second half of the movie. Guy who played him was Clarence Williams III, who's a decently well-known black actor. He is a very recognizable face, and he also appeared in what's probably one of the best horror anthologies of the 1990s, titled Tales from the Horde. So it's interesting seeing him here about 5 years earlier. And I know that you're not necessarily a big anthology horror movie fan, but just wanted to point that out for anybody who may be. Plus, who could miss the 1 second cameo of Danny Trejo? Like as soon as I saw that mask, I'm like, hey, is that Danny Trejo? I mean, who else could it be though? So.
Yeah, playing the role that he was born to play. Oh well, I mean, he's made it really far, so kudos to him.
I also wanted to point out just one last thing. One of my favorite scenes in this movie is probably the shooting range scene. I thought the way that was filmed was pretty fantastic, and I think you pretty much know what's coming. But I really, that's probably one of my favorite, I guess, quote-unquote massacres in the movie. And for that scene alone, I was pretty impressed.
Yeah, and I don't remember the details surrounding this, but that was actually quite a notorious scene. I think it had a lot of trouble getting passed by the, what do they call it, the MPAA?
I can imagine so.
Yeah, they, I think it was probably cut in a lot of different versions, and it took a while to get that uncut. So yeah, it's definitely a really cool scene in the movie.
I mean, and of course the prison sequence toward the end is also pretty good. He's just going through the prison, killing half the people. I mean, it's some pretty good fun.
Yeah, a pretty epic fire stunt at the end, which is actually surpassed by an even better fire stunt at the end of part 3, but we'll talk about that later.
Is that one of the few positive things people say about part 3?
To be honest, part 3 is still a decent movie. It's not bad. It's just not as good as this one. I mean, some people talk about it like it's a terrible movie. It certainly has its problems, but it's... I think if you're a fan of the first 2, you're still going to enjoy the third one. Just maybe not as much. Yeah,
I'll just say one other thing. And this is a very small thing, but I always appreciate a nice death sequence. And this, the shooting range was one of my favorites. But there's a really quick one. Just the gloved hands of the Maniac, the Maniac Cop. His hands just coming out and snapping this one guy's neck. Just like 0.3 seconds. It's a very quick, sufficient kill, and I rather enjoy that.
Yeah. So as I've been saying, I think this is a really good sequel. It's got a lot more action than the original. I mean, it's probably not as suspenseful as the original, just because we know now who the character is, and we know a lot more about them. It's got some good kills, some good stunts in the movie. It's just a good ride. I give the movie a 9 out of 10, and this is one of those movies that goes back to even when, back in the VHS days where I was a little kid, so I was even watching it back then.
Speaking of a good ride, one thing I didn't mention was the scene in which a character is handcuffed to a car. Yeah. And that scene, when I was watching it, I was like sitting on the edge of my seat like, oh hey, this is interesting. So
Yeah.
that seems like a moderately terrifying position to be in, and it's done really well. I agree that this movie is mostly as good as the original. I, of course, would always recommend the original more, just because of the addition that this movie throws in, the talkative serial killer guy, and it just rubbed me the wrong way. I didn't particularly like the character, and eventually something happens to the character that shot him up, so I was okay with that. It's a pretty good movie, not quite as good as the original, but probably worth a watch. I'd rate it above average, just slightly above a 7.5. I would probably round it down, though, to a 7 as opposed to moving it to an 8. So it's still a pretty good movie, just not necessarily anything that blows anybody away.
And I'd also just like to add that this is not a Christmas movie. It seems to come up on a lot of Christmas movie lists just because it has a Christmas tree in the background of one scene, which you barely even notice. So just throwing that out there, this is not a Christmas movie.
Is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
It's definitely more of a Christmas movie than this one.
Okay. On that note, next up we have the Australian flick Classic Blues. All things considered, the plot's somewhat simple. A woman who is well known for having a sort of a famous YouTube cat who everybody watches her cat videos. Her cat gets killed by somebody who comes and rapes her.
Keep it together.
No, okay, yeah, I am fine. So she is, of course, going through a lot of grief from that, becoming somewhat emotionally detached, trying to find meaning in life without her cat, which a very, long time cat, I'm guessing. There's also a guy who loses a cat also, and he's trying to bring the cat back, and this guy has all types of problems. So he dresses up in a pretty ridiculous looking cat mask and undersized clothes, and tries to collect enough blood from I think 9 bodies in order to he believes this will bring his cat back. So he's sort of a serial killer type guy going around, and they cross paths, this woman and this man, they cross paths and things begin to happen. It's a very different movie. Australia is a country that has brought very few what I would call typical horror movies to the genre, which, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Classic Blues is a movie that if you see, it will probably stick with you for a lot of different reasons. Honestly, before I touch on my feelings, I sort of want to see what Chucky has to say about this one.
Yes. Well, I'd been kind of interested in seeing this movie for quite some time when you said, hey, this is a movie we could potentially discuss. I thought, okay, this is my time to finally watch it. So I hadn't seen it before this past week. And I wanted to see it because I thought it would be enjoyable.
How'd that go?
To be honest, it's probably been one of the most difficult movies for me to rate in my own head. Because I can, as you said, there's a lot of things in the movie that certainly stick with you. And it's not always in the most positive way. I thought it was a really bleak movie, and obviously it involves some rape, and, when we were talking about I Spit on Your Grave and all the rape stuff, at least there was, some sort of positive spin at the end where she's getting revenge, and the guys that did all that terrible stuff to her, we kind of get to see them get their comeuppance. And in this movie, a lot of bad things happen to this woman and many other women in the movie. And there's not really any payoff throughout the movie for it. Just all this bad stuff happens, a lot more weird stuff happens, like this mutant cat thing at the end. I mean, I'm not someone who necessarily cares if the movie ends on a positive note or a negative note. But there's nothing throughout the movie. It just seemed like everything was bleak, and not that that's a bad thing. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's if you haven't seen this movie, it's a somewhat difficult movie to explain. A lot of people, and rightly so, say if you're a big fan of blood and gore, you should see this, and you probably should. There's a lot of fantastic special effects in this movie, and some of them I think are actually really good. The cinematography is fantastic. Even that opening scene after the first two kills, the killer just sitting on the couch. I don't know. I really like the way they did that. It definitely has in my opinion, has a very professional feel about it. It's just the content of the movie is, shall we say, unsettling and uncomfortable. It's really well done, but it's unsettling. That rape scene the rape scene's not even that graphic. What I actually find worse than the rape scene is the reaction videos. Like, talk about a sickening indictment on the culture we live in, because that's not something that's out too removed from what you could theoretically see on the internet. I know it's somewhat difficult movie because of the content, but at the same time it's a very I think it's made extraordinarily well. Like I said, great special effects. The music and soundtrack is very intense. Sometimes it's just harsh noise popping up, and that kept you on your feet anyway. And I actually sort of like that during the opening, opening credit scene. That music was hideous, but at the same time, I sort of like what they're going for. I know it's a very interesting movie that I can definitely see that would turn some people off, but it's probably a movie that's still worth watching, at least giving a shot. And I actually think the ending, the very ending, like when the police are investigating the house, I think that's actually, I didn't remember, I've seen this once before, and that scene didn't stick with me the first time, but having seen this one again, I actually really liked the sort of almost bleak, empty feel of that. They're just watching videos of this guy playing with his cat, and it seems normal, and that guy became, this extraordinarily brutal killer. Not only say brutal killer, it's like he acts like a cat half the time. It's very creepy. I don't know, it's a very interesting movie. That's, like Chucky said, somewhat difficult to really get your thoughts down.
Yeah, like you're saying, some of the music in the movie does help to, I guess, provide a certain style that they had with they had a lot of a few different slow motion scenes with music, and the way some of those scenes were filmed, I thought were quite likable.
Yeah, I just want to mention the one scene in the hostel where he takes out 4 women. I really enjoy that scene. That scene, like almost, it's not necessarily happy music, but it's music in the background. He's just slaughtering these women. Like, that scene, I think was really well done, and I definitely appreciated that.
Yeah, that was the main scene that I was trying to reference there, and I believe they play that same song in the ending credits as well. But yeah, so I kind of like some of the style of the movie. It's just the content throughout is just, I'm still not sure how I feel about it overall.
Yeah, so I think this is a type of movie. I think it was like well made, but I don't know. It just I don't think many people would necessarily have fun watching this. I think they can appreciate it as, made pretty well, but actually having fun watching it, for the most part, I just don't see it. At the same time, it's probably still a movie worth seeing. My main problem with the movie, there's a extended sequence toward the conclusion that I just thought wasn't particularly necessary, and I don't think it really added anything to the movie. I don't know. It's a dream sequence in which, in the dream sequence, she wakes up from another dream. So it's just, I don't know. I don't usually care for extended sequences like that, especially when they're trying to play it off as real, even though you could sort of tell it was probably a dream sequence, but you didn't know for sure. If they had just cut that scene out I probably would have been a lot happier with this movie. That just felt a bit almost too over the top for me. Especially, well, of course, the ending was all types of messed up. If that scene hadn't been there, I would personally like this movie quite a bit more. It doesn't make the content any easier to get through, but I do think instead of being like an hour 35 minutes, just being like 25 minutes, that probably would have been okay. Like both of us said, it's a somewhat difficult movie to watch. If you've seen this one, you probably understand why we say that. I actually didn't like this one the first time I saw it. It was recommended to me by a friend, another horror movie friend, and it just didn't do much for me, probably because of the very, somewhat gruesome content of the movie. I mean, the gore is great, but the rape scene's difficult, and then the reaction video is difficult. It's just, like Chucky said, that's a bleak feel. Watching it again, I definitely appreciate the movie a lot more, and I would actually I'd seen it again, I'd probably rate this one above average, and I'd probably end up giving it a 7.5, but because the movie does so many things well, and I only had really one major complaint with it, I'd probably round up to an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, as I was saying before, I'm struggling to think of an appropriate rating for the movie, because I did enjoy certain aspects of it, but overall, on a whole, I'm just not sure. I think for now, I'm just going to settle with a 5 out of 10, with the possibility of a rewatch perhaps changing my score in the future. Yeah, like I was saying, it's a very bleak, gruesome movie that certainly, if you're looking for any kind of positive outcome, you're not going to find it here. And clearly, if you're a fan of movies that are just like really fucked up and weird, this is something that I recommend that they watch.
If you're a fan of fucked up movies, I'm hoping you probably already saw this one.
Yeah. I was in a Facebook group where people are actually asking for recommendations for like just really fucked up movies, and after I'd seen this movie, I said, hey, try this one. Someone else comes along saying, yeah, I second that, I've seen it,
Also worth mentioning, I believe this movie is also Kickstarter funded, which is a somewhat new phenomenon, and I appreciate how movies that start with somewhat lowly beginnings can turn out as decently made as this one is, even if you don't necessarily enjoy the content. I don't know if many people could argue the movie wasn't made well.
Yeah.
Speaking about a movie that there's probably not going to be many comments for.
Actually, to be honest, I actually have quite a few comments. Probably the most comments about this movie.
Oh, that's interesting.
Out of all the ones that are on the list for today.
That should make for a fun conversation.
At least maybe from one side.
Oh.
So next up, we're going to be talking about Sorority House Massacre, which is about a mental patient who escapes from his facility to chase down and kill some girls at a sorority house, one of which who shares some sort of telepathic link with the killer. Now, this is a really simple movie, but on the positive note, I think it knows exactly what it's going for and what it is, and it even picks a very suitable runtime of, 78 minutes?
It's very digestible, very short.
Yeah, we talked, I think it was last week, about a movie called Cherokee Creek, which went way too long, almost 2 hours, pretty much 2 hours, and that was a huge problem with the movie. Whereas I think on the flip side, this movie, it knew exactly how long it should run for based on the amount of content that they had. It doesn't really have any standout characters outside of maybe the killer. It does have some very... The music in the movie is quite decent, very 80s-ish, cheap but effective, I guess, for this type of movie. It doesn't have... there's some okay kills in the movie, nothing too elaborate. They're all just pretty much stabbings, but I think the most brutal one is right at the very end.
I pretty much like any 80s slasher I see, even the ones I don't necessarily love. like such as like Sweet 16, I still generally enjoy the experience, and this was no different. I really like Sorority House Massacre. In fact, I probably liked it more than both the House and Sorority Row from 83 or the Slumber Party Massacre from 82. And there's a few reasons. One, I thought the addition of the dream sequences gave a very, very unique feel. It almost felt like sort of a Nightmare on Elm Street type scenario.
That's something I was also going to say.
I deeply apologize for stealing your point. But there are actually some, it's cheap, but there's some mildly creepy scenes in the dreams. And I really thought they did a good job with that, despite the obvious low-budget nature. There's no standout characters, but there's a pretty fun sequence of 3 of the characters changing clothes for like 3 minutes. So
that sax music scene. I was almost expecting like George Michael's Careless Whisper to start. Yeah.
That might have ruined the vibe, in my opinion. I actually like that scene, not just because of the nudity, to be clear, but I like the way they shot that. There's the chains, the clothes changing mid-air as they're throwing it up. I don't know, it just, I sort of enjoyed the feel they went for. It's almost like a 80s music video type thing. And I enjoyed that. I actually do disagree on one point. I actually thought the killer was probably the weakest link in the movie. I didn't hate the guy, I just didn't see it. But, I think most of the kills are okay. There's a TP1, I think that's particularly decent.
And some decent titties in there.
yeah, this movie, as you would hope from an 80s slasher, it has some decent nudity. It's not really over the top. But if you go in hoping for a little something, you might get a little something. So, anyhow, so the movie, I actually really enjoyed it, which might not be too surprising given my deep love of the slasher subgenre. I found very little in this movie to dislike, though.
And I also picked up that this was directed by Carol Frank, who I believe at the time was a film student when she made this movie, and I think it was her first movie, so I thought she did a very good job there. It actually came across like, I know it's a low-budget movie, but I didn't really pick up on any amateurish filmmaking here in comparison to any other low-budget slasher movie that's been put out there.
And in fact, because of the runtime, there's a lot of slashers from the 80s, and some of them aren't that great. But this one, in my opinion, is just a lot more digestible, and because of that, it can sort of move ahead of, I wasn't a big fan of a movie called The Mutilator, and The Mutilator's, decently well liked by a lot of 80s fans, but I didn't love the movie. But I thought this movie, because of its nature, is even better than some of the, B slasher movies that a lot of people like. That's not to say people don't like Sorority House Massacre, but when it comes to 80s slashers, I generally don't hear this one spoken about that much.
It's also got some, I really enjoy some of the shots in the dark with the blue lighting, and I think they all look really, really good.
This movie was a lot more artistic than you might expect.
You may not pick up on some of that if you're watching maybe a really old, poor quality version, but I mean, I was watching this on Blu-ray. I'm not sure how you watched it, but it definitely accentuated that a lot more on the Blu-ray.
Out of interest, what's your favorite part of one of the dream sequences?
Nothing really in the dream sequences stood out to me all that much. Was the scene where she found all the dolls at the table a part of the dream? I can't recall now. Yeah. I mean, that's memorable a little bit to me, but not necessarily any of it stood out too much. But, I mean, the parts that kind of stood out were just her visions of this guy, like holding a knife, just looking at her for a quick second or two.
I just want to sort of reiterate, I think this movie stands out, one, because of, actually, like you said, it's not only is it this woman's first movie, it might be one of her few movies. I don't know if she did much more after this, which is unfortunate because, this might come across to many people as sort of a generic slasher. In many ways it is. The addition of the telepathic link, which is sort of explained in the movie, actually. I thought that was interesting, along with the dream sequences, which, like I said, it's probably either, mild reference to Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, the dream sequences weren't necessarily amazing, but I really thought there's some decent imagery in some of them. There's one where she finds a picture of 3 little girls, and they all start bleeding out of different stab wounds in them, which I thought was pretty cool. And another thing I enjoyed was that the killer, and we never focus that much on the killer, but we do get to see sort of inside of his mind, and when he's killing some of these sorority girls, he sees them as, his sisters, little girls, and he calls them, of course, by those names too, which really shows us type of insanity we're talking about, and I appreciated that.
Yeah, so just as I've been saying, it's a very simple movie. It knows exactly what it's going for. It doesn't try to do anything too elaborate, and though there is some underlying artsy type extra vision to it that people may not actually catch. And this is a movie, I think, that was just made due to the success of Slumber Party Massacre, because I think Roger Corman had his hands in both movies, and I believe he said they just made this movie, they just wanted to make something similar, throw on a similar title, and, put it out there. And apparently it made enough money to warrant a few sequels as well. But, I think the movie overachieves in a way based on how paper thin the plot is, and just how it's kind of a clone of it clones a lot of the usual slasher cliches, but it throws its own unique vibe on. So I have no problem saying this is an above average slasher movie for me, and I give it a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, so this is actually, out of other horror movies discussed tonight, this is actually my favorite movie, because I'm a sucker for any slasher movie, even if it's a generic slasher movie. I don't really care. I pretty much enjoy all of them, so especially from the 80s, which is probably undeniably one of the best decades for slashers. This one I give an easy 8 out of 10. I've seen this one before and I had fun with it. Saw it again, I still had fun with it. I was actually expecting my rating to go down, but I still had quite a bit of fun with this one, and if you're a fan of slashers and you haven't seen this one, if you've just sort of looked over it because, it might not seem like it would amount to much, I might recommend giving it a second look, because you might find you enjoy it just a bit more than you think you might.
Yeah, and there's some decent titties in the movie.
Yeah, it's true. I read something that the main actress, whose name off the top of my head I don't remember, she actually was also supposed to have some nude scenes, but she didn't read the script before accepting it, but time was cut too short, so she was starting to walk out unless she did have to do them, so they said, fine, you don't need to do them, which is, from what I read, one of the reasons why that one, with just, trying on each other's clothes type scene, where she's just sitting in the back not doing anything, and the 3 other girls are just having the time of their lives. So I thought that was a little interesting tidbit, which I just got from IMDb. So next up we have a somewhat well-known movie. At least I think it's well-known. 2009's Laid to Rest. Movie is probably one of the simplest plots you'll hear. A woman wakes up in a casket, should I say a dead box, and she's somewhat dragged, somewhat confused. She doesn't know her name. She doesn't know where she is. She doesn't know where she's supposed to be or how she got there. She probably doesn't know much. So she's confused. She manages to get out of the mortuary of the funeral home and tries to find some assistance. And all the while there's a killer after her who kills people in quite violent ways. She eventually finds some people to help her out, and they sort of fight the killer, and that's virtually the movie. There's not a whole lot of backstory for pretty much any of the characters. And the backstory we do get toward the end doesn't really do much, in my opinion. But it's the plot itself is somewhat threadbare, but I think most people watch this movie for the special effects, which I think are pretty solid. I can't think of any kill in this movie that disappointed me. So if you're going in it for that type of thing, then you'll probably be okay with this one. What were your thoughts on this one, Chucky?
Yeah. I mean, speaking of some decent titties, I mean, the main woman in this movie, Jesus, she had a big rack. I always felt like Jim Carrey and Liar Liar. I'm like, Mama.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that, because when I was watching this movie, I actually didn't notice that until like the end. so like it's like what is one of the scenes toward the end. I forget which one, but like it's toward the end. Like, oh wait, she's actually a pretty attractive woman.
Believe me, it was on my mind the entire time. But in addition to that, as you're saying, it does
That's
have
gonna be 95% of Chucky's movie, right?
Yeah, let me tell you, it certainly helps. But yeah, like you're saying, the movie does have some really epic kill scenes, or at least really violent kill scenes. And to be honest, if you're looking for something with some pretty gory, violent slasher type kills, especially from the modern era of, the past 10-15 years, this is definitely a movie to be looking at. The character of Chrome Skull, I mean, it's a decent character. It's kind of like a tier 2 level slasher. It's not quite on the same level as, the Michaels and Freddys, but
yeah, to be honest, I'd barely call him a character since we pretty much don't learn anything about him.
He exists. He's a character.
Or does he?
Well, I mean, you learn more in the sequel as well, but
unfortunately,
yeah, probably a little too much. But no, I mean, just from a pure slasher aspect, I don't see how this movie could really disappoint you too much. I know some of the acting's a little up and down. It's not it ain't no Shakespearean play going on in this movie, but
he wants to make me dad.
Yeah. And who was it? Kevin Gage.
Yes.
Some of his like crying scenes, I was just kind of. Anyways,
I don't have to admit, his character. I really did like his character.
Yeah, I liked his character too. But to be honest, there's not a whole lot to say about the movie. It's just a scene. I mean, for me, there's not a whole lot to say about it. It's just got some really epic kill scenes. It moves at a pretty decent pace. There's constant attack scenes throughout. The character of Chrome Skull's pretty decent. The actors do okay. I don't think they did a spectacular job, but enough to, make it an exciting movie. I guess one thing and I mentioned this a while back when we were kind of just briefly talking about the movie, there was this Taylor Swift video, I think the very first video that she ever did, and there's this love interest in the video who actually appears in a scene in this movie and has a really epic death scene. So I recommend you watch that Taylor Swift music video. I can't remember the song, but I think it's that You Belong With Me song.
Well, I usually do go out of my way to watch Taylor Swift videos, but I will do it for you, Chucky.
Well, I thought you said last time that you enjoy her music.
I enjoy her music, I don't like the videos.
Okay. Anywho, I recommend actually watching that music video, not for the song, but just to kind of work up your hatred for this pretty teen boy, and then even though his character I'm sorry, is this a tire sealant guy, or is this the other guy? No, this is the guy that runs the little. Oh, well, he was running the convenience store.
Got it. Okay.
With the shotgun. So in the movie, his character's actually okay. Like he's kind of a good guy, but if you just want to watch a guy with a kind of Justin Bieber type haircut get killed brutally, there you go.
That's a pretty brutal kill.
Well, a lot of them are.
Yes. I think probably one of my favorite ones, and I've seen this one like 3 times. One of the ones that always sticks with me is probably the disembowelment from the woman toward the third or fourth woman, gets her stomach sliced open and her intestines start falling out. I think it's pretty well done. There's also a sequence in this movie where they find a bunch of previous victims, like in coffins and caskets, and there's all types of dismemberments, and some of them are decapitated. I think they find a body that literally both arms and legs are cut off. It's a very, very sickening, sadistic, type sequence. Shows just the pure amount of violence this guy inflicts on people. So that scene that definitely stood out to me. And I know that's probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie. Actually, as good as the kills and as good as some of the final confrontation is, that scene had a very dark feel that I really enjoyed. I think my main problem with this movie, if I have a main problem, is I get it, explained in the movie, but the dragged out nature of the woman, just toward the beginning, just gets on my nerves. Like, she can, barely communicate. She is entirely incoherent. I get it, but I find it a bit annoying. Related, toward the end, we find something out about the main character that we didn't know before. And of course, the main character herself has, some type of amnesia, and she doesn't quite remember. And that revelation, to me, it doesn't change anything. And it didn't seem to change anything in the movie either. Like, no character seemed to react differently to it. I don't know. It just didn't mean anything to me. And one other thing I wanted to point out is that if you're a fan of Game of Thrones, the woman who played Cersei on Game of Thrones also is in this movie playing a somewhat sympathetic character, which is interesting to see. So that was just something that I noticed this time around that I didn't notice last time around, because by that point I'd never watched Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Game of Thrones, so.
That's okay. Well, I would certainly recommend reading the books, which
I know I don't read.
I think Lady Rust has some fantastic special effects. I think it's, for the most part, it's almost flawless insofar as the gore. I just was missing some things from the story. The fact that we don't learn virtually anything about the killer, just no. If you've seen the sequel, we learn some things there. So obviously, if you over-explain something, it also ruins the effect, and there are plenty of sequels that might do that. But having just a blank slate, a guy with a knife going around killing people and taping it without any type of explanation whatsoever, I just wanted something. And we didn't really get anything, which is fine. There's still a decent goal. Because of that, I still gave this an above average rating. I'll probably give it like a 7.5. And it's close, but I'd probably round it up to an 8. It's certainly, out of the 4 horror movies tonight, this is actually probably my least favorite. Even like Classic Blues I enjoyed a bit more than this. Well, enjoyed is a strong word, but I got more out of it than this one, because it's not really that much quote-unquote to get out of this one. But I'll probably give this a 7.5, rounded up to an 8. What do you think, Chucky?
I think it's a good modern slasher movie that's just, really in it for some gruesome kills, and that's the main reason to watch it. I give the movie an 8 out of 10 as well. From just pure slasher fun, I think it works pretty well. Some of the acting in the movie is a little up and down, to be honest, but it doesn't affect my enjoyment a whole lot of the movie. But I can certainly see if someone was really critical of that, they could kind of pull that aspect apart. But, the big titties in the movie from that main character, that certainly helps push it to an 8 for me.
Well, I'm always happy that you can get your big titties. Hopefully they have root beer collared nipples. So.
So the last movie for today is Donnie Darko from 2001. which is about a troubled teenager who is plagued by visions of a man in a large rabbit suit who manipulates him to commit a series of crimes after he's narrowly escaped a bizarre accident. And the movie has a whole time travel element to it as well. To be honest, this is a movie with a plot that's kind of run really out of control. It's there's a lot going on in the movie. So for me to kind of explain it all, it'd just take too long. So I'm just going to leave it at what I just said. The fact that the movie just has so much going on in it, I will admit that I probably don't fully understand 100% of it. Though, despite that, that doesn't affect my enjoyment of the movie at all. I actually really, really, really love the movie. And I think it came at a time when, I was more or less around the same age as Donnie Darko when I watched this movie. Back in, 2001, 2002, when I think it was 2002 when I actually saw the movie, because that's kind of when it was getting released everywhere. It's got a lot of good actors in the movie as well, some veteran actors, and also some young, up-and-coming actors who eventually, Jake Gyllenhaal's obviously had a impressive career by now. And the music in the movie as well really stands out and is used quite well throughout the movie, despite the fact that there are a couple of different cuts of the movie out there, and some of the different cuts change the type of songs being played throughout, which is tough to deal with when trying to choose which version you want to watch. What did you think about this one? Because you only saw this for the first time just recently, didn't you?
Yeah, in fact, I believe I finished it about 5 minutes before we started talking. So it's me cutting it short again.
Well, do you actually look at the runtime and look at the show and you're like, yeah, I can just squeeze this one in?
Well, the funny thing is, I actually thought this movie was an hour and a half. So when I finally started the movie, I'm like, oh shit, this is like a 2-hour movie. So I had enough wiggle room to make it work, but that was a tight fit. A lot tighter than anticipated. This movie, I'll sort of say what Chucky said. I haven't seen this until today, and there's a lot of things I don't understand. I tried reading just a quick quote-unquote explanation from some blog site, and I feel like I have a somewhat better understanding of it. But it doesn't really impact my enjoyment of the movie. I thought many of the characters were interesting in almost like a slice of life type way. You have a English teacher who wants to try to teach a different way than what the academic principal wants, and you have an Asian student who wants to be popular and somewhat more liked than she is, and she has her own secrets going on, and there's just a lot of small moving parts in this movie. Some of them, add up to something great, and some of them don't necessarily. I mean, even the motivational speaker guy, I hated that guy. Even before we find out about him, I hated that guy. And the do-gooder gym teacher, I know the actress, but I don't know where I know her from. But
she gets killed in Child's Play 2.
Oh, hey, she does, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's it's a surprise. She does a great job as in my opinion, very unlikable, character.
Sometimes I doubt your commitment to sparkle motion.
Yeah, she's also a bit over the top at times. But that's okay if she wants to go and defend child molesters. That's her business. But and still claim to be the Christian morality. But she was one of the many more questionable characters. And there's a lot of characters in this. I don't know, just even if you don't understand the whole time travel, it's not even necessarily time travel, but if you don't understand all the implications from the finale of the movie, there's still a lot of things in the movie to appreciate. And even though the movie is an hour and 55 minutes, I don't think there was ever a time when I felt disengaged. I was consistently wondering what was going on. I was wondering what was, where this movie was going. I had no idea. All I knew about this movie was that there was a guy in a bunny suit and some kid who was messed up. and that's pretty much all I knew. So I'm happy that I went into this with, I didn't know it was going to be anything about time issues or anything like that. So I'm happy I went into this not knowing much, because even though I didn't necessarily understand everything, it did take me for quite a ride.
Do you happen to know which version you watched? I know you know the kind of roughly the runtime. I can't remember off the top of my head if the theatrical version runs that long, or if, because there is like a director's cut version that's got Blu-ray releases, and it actually provides more detail than what the theatrical one did.
Yeah, so I'm suspecting, I read a little bit about this. I'm suspecting I didn't see the one that explained a bit more. I think it goes into the book. I think it's the philosophy of time travel. I think it goes into the book a bit more. It may even deal with chapter titles and such.
Yes, it does.
And yes, and that's something that I did not experience. I'll be entirely honest. Even if I did, I don't know if I would have understood any about it, because we're talking about some pretty deep stuff here. This is, I'm not necessarily uneducated, but this is, whenever this type of stuff pops up in movies, even like the butterfly effect, it takes a little. So I didn't see that voice, and I'd definitely be interested in seeing that voice in the future, because anything that can shine a little more light on what's going on, I'll be okay with.
Yeah, the director's cut, it actually does give some pretty good extra info. It does, I'm not going to say it clears everything up, but it does make it a little easier to understand certain parts of the movie. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if the director himself doesn't entirely know what's going on either. I know there's a lot of people out there who think they can fully 100% explain everything, but I don't know if the director has come out and explained every single part, but unless he has, I'm not convinced that anyone out there fully understands it, and they're just kind of giving their best guess. But with that being said, the difference between that theatrical and director's cut, I tend to watch the director's cut just because it has all that extra stuff in it and some extra scenes, but then there's also, I did watch the theatrical version quite many times before, and like I was saying, there is some differences in music, and so it's always a tough decision which one to watch, but I always have to go with the director's cut, I think, just because it does make the movie a lot easier to understand.
Yeah, what I found interesting when I was reading about this movie afterwards is that many people say the old woman, who's the woman who wrote the book, whose name I can't remember right now, that she is almost a pivotal character, which is, watching, the movie I watched, the version I watched, it's not really made clear whatsoever, so as soon as I read, I'm like, what did I miss? And, I probably missed a great many things, but then again, if you're watching this for the first time, there's only so much you can take in at once. So I'd be surprised if anybody watched, especially the theatrical version, and got out of it what people do watching the director's cut.
But yeah, this is a movie that has just also a lot of great individual standout scenes. You can really look anywhere throughout the movie. I could just pull out one when Patrick Swayze's character has that event at the school, and Donnie's having that back and forth with him, and eventually calls him the fucking Antichrist, and
I definitely enjoyed this.
Yeah,
because I remember back in my high school days going to all of these really shitty pop rally type things, and
yeah,
I enjoy the attitude.
Yeah, I think anyone who's been to high school from at least from the mid-90s to, I don't know, the last 10, 15 years, that they'll really relate well to the atmosphere of the school itself, or all those scenes. I guess another thing I'd just like to point out is the dad in the movie. There's the one scene where Donnie's in trouble and he's at the principal's office, and that one lady's like, "He told me to insert the life. What was it? Something into my anus."
The father's just trying to stop himself.
He's just kind of laughing as he leaves the office, and he's trying not to laugh.
Yeah, it's the same thing near the beginning. There's like a dinner sequence when the older brother, the older sister and brother just going back and forth with this commonplace vulgarity that teenagers use, and the father is really going out of his way to stop it. And I don't know, there's so many fun scenes in this.
What's a fuck ass?
I can see the mother was losing control, but that's okay.
Yeah, that does make me think it may be worth just quickly mentioning. There is a sequel, which is definitely
has been disavowed by everyone, basically.
Yeah, the main character of that is that little girl. And, well, to be honest, I've only seen the sequel once, and even though it's definitely nowhere near as good as this movie, and probably not even, I wouldn't even call it anywhere near a good movie, I think I need to watch it again, just to see if there's anything to redeem from it.
I do think this change to this movie comes from the characters, because of course, the plot keeps you wondering what's going on. But all these characters, who just really, they really focus your attention. Like there's all these small little things going on, like that one girl's, stepfather, who may be looking for them, to potentially harm them. And there's all these I even like that one. I think it was a science teacher, who gave Donnie the time travel, book about potentially, time travel. So I think the characters really make this movie work well, and it helps that I don't think there was a disappointing actor here, at least anybody disappointed me. I was pretty happy with pretty much all of them, which doesn't happen all that often with movies.
Yeah. I swear, I didn't even realize Seth Rogen was in the movie until I had rewatched back maybe 5 years ago, and that's after I probably watched the movie more than 10 times by now.
Yeah, when I saw him, I'm like, is that Seth Rogen? And I'm always happy when I see a completely random face in the movie I'm watching. It just makes me feel just a little bad about myself.
And he also enjoys seeing some boobs.
That is true. His character here's a bit of a dick, but that's okay. It's Seth Rogen, so no, I don't know. It's, even the small characters like that definitely make the movie all the more worth watching. I also I did like the talent show scene, how they were sort of showing the talent show and juxtaposing that with the guy about to set the house on fire, going back and forth, and as the house erupts into flames, the crowd's applauding the talent show, and I thought it was really beautifully done. Which could probably be sad for a lot of the movie, to be honest. I think they pretty much knew what they were going for with this movie, and I think they knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, so Donnie Darko is really awesome movie. As I was saying, I don't fully understand 100% every single nook and cranny detail of it, but I still really love it. It's a really original movie, well acted, lots of good characters, well suited music, just has a whole bunch of great scenes, and I give the movie a perfect 10.
Yeah, I probably understand maybe 15% of the movie, but I enjoyed pretty much every minute of it. Music I enjoyed, characters I enjoyed, the confusing plot, I enjoyed, and I know there's a lot going for this movie, and it'd be nice to maybe understand more of what's going on, more about the tangential timelines and such. But I really enjoyed this, and the fact that I didn't understand some of the major going-ons didn't really impact it for me. I would give this probably an 8 out of 10.
Well, I think the more... I'm sure you'll rewatch it again at some point, whether it's a year or 5 years, but I will say I'm sure you'll understand more of it each time you rewatch it, because that's what I did, and that's even before the director's cut version. Every single time, and that was back when the internet wasn't anywhere near as big as it is now, so I wouldn't normally just run to the internet to see what people explain something in a movie. YouTube wasn't around back then, so yeah, I think the more you watch a movie, you'll pick up on some even smaller details that you would have missed the first time.
So how is life?
Let's
open up the question.
Well, to be completely honest, I actually had a mental breakdown on Wednesday.
I'm deeply sorry.
It's just something that happened at work, and I mean, it wasn't work completely that was responsible for it, but it kind of triggered it. So, it's kind of bordering on having a Frank Grimes moment.
I'd recommend against that.
Yeah, I didn't quite reach that level of insanity, but that's okay. The next day ended up working out really well. I mean, I'm sure you're not very much into sports or anything, but and I'm not a huge sports guy myself. I only watch one sport out there, which is basketball, and I play it two nights a week in 2 different competitions. And just that Thursday night, I had a game against a team that I've been playing. You know, we've played this team 4 or 5 times every single year for maybe like 5 years straight, and we always lose to them. And quite often it's, you know, a very close game, and we just...
That's usually how it goes in basketball.
Yeah, we just lose right at the end of the game. In fact, I think 2 of the most recent games before this most recent one, we were winning in the game, and then right at the end they'd hit like a 3-point shot and they'd win the game. And the funny thing is, I know I'm probably talking too much about basketball right now for you, but in this game, I'm only mentioning this because it kind of helped me recover from my breakdown earlier in the week. But so the game was kind of about to take the exact same turn. We were actually winning right near the end of the game, and the other team, due to some unfortunate circumstances, they managed to... we're up by 4 points, and then suddenly they hit a shot right in the last 20 seconds to go up by 1 point. It just felt like deja vu, you know, flashbacks, and okay, here we go. Same thing again, you know, we're winning, they come back, they hit a shot, game over. Except this time, I actually hit a really long 3-point shot just before the buzzer to win the game. So,
beautiful.
And, you know, it wasn't... So it wasn't just...
Can it be found on YouTube anywhere?
No, unfortunately not.
That's unfortunate.
My wife was actually there. She doesn't usually come to my games, but she actually did watch that one, but unfortunately not filming it. But, you know, just... I mean, hitting a game-winning shot for anyone is a beautiful moment, but to do it against a team that for almost 5 years you've been just desperately wanting to beat and always coming up short against them, it was just, you know, just extra special.
Hopefully you got pissed drunk that night in celebration.
No, I had to come back and edit the last week's show.
Okay.
I needed extra time. Not a whole lot else going on. What about you?
I never have anything going on, to be honest. Once I get back from work, I usually just stick at home. Occasionally I go out meet with some people. Generally speaking, I'm at home like 95% of the time, which I'm okay with for the time being. My income is not one that allows me to be, you know, living luxurious lives, so I'm okay right now. So.
Unless you're like those Maniac coupon people He spends
Well, luckily-
40 hours a week collecting coupons to buy $1,000 worth of groceries for 55 cents.
I was impressed with that. Luckily, I'm not that bad off. I'm just like moderately lower class. I mean, there's so many people doing worse than me. So, I mean, I have I do okay. I get by. It's just, there's so many people in my age range who sort of in the same boat. They're making money that they're trying to save up, but all these credit cards keep coming after you. It's just a fun time.
Yeah. I know about credit cards. I'm still trying to clear up all of that and never getting one ever again.